Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're doing our follow-up on the Guns and Gears playtest for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So we didn't get quite as extensive testing as we did for the Magus and the Summoner, and I think that's okay. For the most part, I think that these two classes are a lot closer to a final version. Going to require a lot fewer tweaks from the developers than those classes. If you're curious about what I'm talking about there, feel free to check out those classes. While they definitely needed work, they're totally viable to use in your game, and the same can be said for the Guns and Gears classes. We're going to talk a little bit about what we liked, what my players seem to enjoy about each one. I actually got to play test a couple of these classes myself as well, so that was really fun for me. But, so we're just going to talk about what's good, and then we're going to talk about sort of what's bad, and then at the end we're going to talk about hopes and dreams, shooting for the star, weird options I hope to see added. So we'll start with the Gunslinger. I really liked the overall feel. When we first were looking at it, I was very excited. I thought that it looked pretty much perfect. When it came time to actually play it, though, we did see a few hiccups. So while the tools are really fun and the playstyles are interesting, with some really cool reactions, it does just need a little bit more. Specifically, a little bit more oomph, I think. Versus most martial classes that have some sort of ability to gain passive damage boosts. That includes the Barbarian getting their Rage, Rogues getting Sneak Attack, Investigators getting something very similar to Sneak Attack. Swashbucklers get a lot of extra precision dice as well, based on having Panache, and Rangers with their chosen target can opt into the precision path there as well, which is arguably the best one for a crossbow ranger, which is the closest comparison to the Gunslinger right now. So it's very interesting that the Gunslinger and crossbow ranger both deal with reload mechanics, and they deal with it in similar but slightly different ways. And there's no question that the tools at the Gunslinger's disposal are fun and interesting in terms of how they get around those clunky reload options. But what it lacks is something like the Ranger's precision to make up for that. Now, it is worth noting that because we don't have the advanced guns that would hold theoretically multi-shots, things like a revolver, or a multi-shot carbine type of a thing, so it's hard for us to judge exactly what that aspect of the class is going to look like. The reality is a lot of people who are playing a Gunslinger are probably not going to be dealing with reloads. So you're going to have these sort of two very different play styles built into it, depending on the type of weapon that you choose. Not unlike a Ranger. The Ranger is, if they go with the bow, they're not going to have to deal with the reload. They're going to typically have a hand free when they're not shooting their bows. And the same can sort of be said for a Gunslinger using a multi-shot gun. While reload will still be a thing, you'll get a few shots somewhere, most likely between 4 and 6, as typical for early revolvers. That's going to be a very different gameplay style, and it's going to require a whole separate number of feats that we don't even have, because why would we use them when we don't have those guns readily available in the playtest? So all this criticism about the Gunslinger has to have that little caveat, that little asterisk of there's a good chance none of this is going to apply to the version of a Gunslinger that you play. With that said, the martial and simple weapons do still get the legendary proficiency versus only the master proficiency that you can get to with the advanced firearms. And we're not going to talk about how strange and weird that feels that, more advanced guns are somehow less accurate. That is a gameplay balance choice. I understand why they made it. I don't necessarily love it, but I also don't think that it's anything to get too up in arms about. So within these confines of what we had to play test, the single shot, really early type of firearms, flintlocks and things like that. How satisfying is it compared to a Ranger? Well, the Ranger gets the precision option, which theoretically you do as well in one of your 3 build options if you go for the sniper build, but the sniper build cannot apply that extra damage as often as the Ranger, and the Ranger is not limited to only doing it to ranged attacks. You can get that precision damage with melee weapons, whatever you need to do. So it's both less versatile and going to happen less often. So that's something to consider. You do have the +2 to attack with the guns, but the guns also have typically reduced range and damage, and they have the very big flaw of not being very quiet at all. So, a sneaky crossbow ranger can exist, but a sneaky sniper probably doesn't. Once that first shot goes off, anybody within a reasonable amount of distance knows that something is happening. So those are both things to consider there. And as such, I do feel that some additional damage boost option right now would be ideal. Yes, you get the explosive extra damage because of the fatal trait with those simple and martial guns, but you're still crit fishing, and against anything that's similar to your level, it's just not going to be something you want to rely on. It just doesn't happen quite often enough to justify some of the downsides versus just using, the average extra damage die, extra larger size that you might get with crossbows or, a ranger using a regular bow. The other thing to consider with that build is how many feats you may need to invest to be able to reload properly. Of course, there is the big hiccup that the dual-wielding roles don't really have an option to do that effectively, to reload their weapons until level 6. That's something that's obviously clearly going to be addressed. The devs have even said it. There's going to be a 2-weapon reload sort of option at a much lower level, not unlike the 2-weapon fighter archetype. So that is sort of addressed. But it doesn't change the fact that you're still investing feats just to be able to use your ability, be able to use your weapon more than once per round. You're probably going to be taking feats to do that. And because some of those feats are pretty situational in how they work, you may in fact have multiple reload feats. I would recommend it even, just to allow yourself as much versatility as possible. This is not Pathfinder 1st Edition. You do not want to pick one path and hope that you can force the enemy and each combat to work along your one path. You want to have variety. So that's definitely something to consider, the amount of almost feat taxes that build will have. Will it be worth it in the final version with all the extra feats that I'm sure we're going to get compared to the advanced firearms, and then therefore by extension compared to other classes? I think so. I trust Paizo to get it done, but right now in this build, those are the flaws that I see. Just wanted to put those out there and let you know. Final verdict, lots of fun tools, especially those interesting reactions, and a lot of surprising support options within it, though I don't necessarily think, like some people might, that it's designed to be a support class. It definitely has a lot of tools there, which is something that I hope that all martial classes can start building to as we get more and more feats added in, just to spread that out and give those options. More martials have things to do besides just, do a combat maneuver or make an attack. I just really like that. But, you're very much like a monk. You're dealing less damage overall, but you have reach, but the monk has movement. The monk also has significantly higher defense, but you have the higher attack. So really, I think monk is sort of the best comparison there, and it just doesn't come out that favorable for the gunslinger because the monk has focus spells and abilities. They have interesting stances. They have a lot that they can do with their action economy besides having to reload their fists. Not to say that the gunslinger isn't fun. Again, it's going to work great in your game, and I'm very confident that the final build will be a lot of fun. So next up is the Inventor. The Inventor is actually pretty cool and doesn't need a whole lot. The biggest red flag, something that we didn't think looked that bad on paper, but then as soon as you get into combat, you realize, oh, that's no good, is the unstable trait. It's something that is on most of the coolest things that you can do, and unfortunately sort of applies across the board. So it limited what you could do. What it does is it says that if you use any of these really fancy tricks with your invention, it becomes unstable. To try to use it again, you have to roll a check that you will probably fail at. It's a very high DC 17, just flat D20 check. That means that you're unlikely to pick up more than one of those really cool tricks because you're unlikely to ever get them to work beyond one per combat. Now, of course, the devs immediately put out that was the incorrect version of that, and they sort of gave us a glimpse of how the final version of Unstable will work. We know that it's most likely going to let you do the thing again, but you have to roll for a complication, sort of. So you'll still be able to accomplish the task without having to roll that check just to be able to do it. Instead, you're rolling the check to see what happens because you're pushing your device past its limit. Now, how punishing is that going to be? Of course, we don't have the final version, so it's hard to say. But just the fact that you're going to potentially be able to do more than one unstable action per combat is a huge boon to the class. And realistically, a lot of fights only last, 2 to 4 rounds typically. So even at 2, that's a lot better than 1, and could be enough to carry you. Hopefully, it'll be set up so that you can do a lot more than even just 2. Again, we don't know the final version. I have confidence, since they've already addressed that it's a problem and they knew that it was a problem, that we're going to be fine there. Barring that, it's really sort of in a great place. It's a unique class. It's a frontline martial with potentially really great armor or weapon or a pet. Where it does fall off a little bit is the pet especially is not quite as good as you might want it to be. You're not getting its higher level specializations, till pretty late in the game when it's can kind of catch up a little bit. I don't think a lot needs done. Maybe just the option to apply multiple sort of specializations the way that a traditional animal companion could might be all that's needed there. But we also don't know exactly what type of additional innovations we're going to be able to see in terms of modifications that we can put on them. So maybe it'll be made up for that way. Unlike the summoner, the action economy does seem to work out pretty well. I would like to see support actions like on traditional animal companions, so that if they don't do anything to make up for the lower attack, then maybe there is less reliance on the creature's attack. Sort of like the support actions where if you just hit a creature near your animal companion gets to just sort of proc a special ability. That could probably be enough, honestly, on its own. Tamper is a really interesting ability that just does not apply in enough situations. As it is, it only works on creatures that are wearing armor or holding a weapon. I think just allowing it to apply to constructs could be enough, especially if they make it a default part of the class, which I do think it should be. Maybe not at first level, but, picked up at, 3rd level or something like that. I think it could be great. And by giving it free, it doesn't have to be quite as strong as maybe it does if it's a feat that you're choosing. So it's okay if it's got the limited scope. But again, really just fits thematically, I think, to be able to dismantle constructs and tamper with them just the way that you would a held weapon. Additionally, it would be cool to see the armor get variations that aren't just about being heavy armors that you're carrying around. Let's see those stealth inventors with those cloaking technologies built into their lighter armors. Let's hopefully see some sort of a shield, maybe as an extension of the armor or on its own to round out as an additional type of an innovation. I think that would be a lot of fun. And most importantly, it would branch out the types of inventors that you would see. Also worth noting, Overdrive can be a little bit finicky at low levels and then fall off in viability at higher levels. It's not the worst thing. It's not something that really needs a lot of attention compared to some of the other stuff, but it would be nice to just see that get a little something to scale a little better with level. So that's it. Definitely a lot less contention and a lot less heat than the Magus and the Summoner. But I think that's a good thing. The Gunslinger especially is just in a weird place because, again, we don't know what half of that class is going to look like. That is the half that are using the advanced firearms. We have some estimations on what that might look like, but considering we completely lack the feats or anything else that might come with that build because we wouldn't take them, considering we don't have those weapons, it just leaves a lot of question marks there, but I do have confidence that they'll be addressed and addressed well. It's surprising how well, even with how much I've sort of complained about it, it's surprising how well the Gunslinger does work, even with what would be considered the suboptimal version of its weapons. Just imagine how people would feel about the Ranger if the first time we saw the Ranger, it was only using crossbows. So hopes and dreams, what's the craziest stuff that I would like to see besides stuff that I already mentioned? I really like that idea of the stealthy armor for the Inventor. I sure would like to see a Gunslinger with a horse. Granted, there's a lot of ways to multi-class and get a horse, or you can also just buy a horse and that would be fine. But Hi-Ho Silver, Trigger, there's a lot of classic cowboy tropes that involve having your trusty horse. So that'd be something I maybe doesn't necessarily need its own way to get, although I would be down for it if it did. It would just be really cool to see some sort of cowboy riding his horse, or her horse, as it may be. As far as ways to branch out, that seems pretty interesting. For the Inventor, I would really like to see some sort of minor contraptions that are just deployable, not unlike snares, sort of, but also, pop-up terrain and other utility tools. Sort of like how an alchemist can give out some potions to their allies in the beginning. Just sort of like little things that you could hand, like a flash grenade, things like that you could just hand off to party members for a little added utility on top of what you're already bringing to the table. I just love the idea, and there's even a higher level feat to do this with your companion, but just a low level thing like, oh, let's just get out some low cover. Let me throw out this deployable device, and maybe I'm accepting that I might be losing out on those materials and all that if we don't gather it up and I don't take the time to twist it back down into its compact shape. Whatever sort of minor inconveniences may have to come with that, I'd be fine with. I just like that idea of just having this bag of tricks that you can reach into, whether it's deployable cover, like I said, or other utility items, or maybe goggles of dark vision for your allies around. Just little things like that to make it feel more like the Inventor isn't just a one-trick pony, like this is my specialty here, but it's actually got a lot of tools and a lot of variation outside of its main thing. Again, more well-rounded characters are just more interesting, and characters that have more options in combat, instead of being focused in on a single concept, are really where it's at. So that's it. So that's our review of the playtest classes. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the developers say after getting those surveys out. All right, everybody, that's it. Thanks for coming along and hanging out. Let us know again what you think of these classes, if you're using them in your games as is, what sort of modifications you're making, if you feel the need. We really appreciate you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, helps the channel so much, and we'll see you next time.